What's going on, everybody? Today is Tuesday, September 5th. You're watching the Daily AI Show live, and thank you so much to Jumi, Andy, and Beth for holding down the fort yesterday while some of us were off for Labor Day here in the States and Canada. But we got most of us back today. I think Carl's still on vacation, but we'll probably be back later this week or tomorrow. And today's topic is all about got the music set on. There we go. It's all about the flaws of AI. So obviously we love to talk. We're all, I would say, bullish in a lot of ways on this show about what AI can do. Obviously, we all have a personal, invested interest in seeing AI be a large part of the future of business and everything else. But that's not to say that we're not all very, very, very aware of a lot of the faults. So we're talking about today about things like copyright information, bias, accountability issues. We're talking about the AI not necessarily having outdated information. I'll even throw one more in there that I saw this amazing video yesterday, and I want to make sure I get credit. It was on TikTok, but the whole point of the video was the guy was like, AI, there's no knowledge. He's like, I know that's a weird thing to think because it processes language and we read the language and we perceive that as knowledge. He's like, but there's no knowledge. He's like, the language model is literally just trying to guess the next best tokens in any case. And that comes back to us in language and we perceive that as knowledge. He said, but there's no knowledge there. And I thought that was a really interesting thought. So I'll kind of open it up to the group here on any one of these topics, but there's certainly a lot of areas where AI leaves a lot to be desired and a lot of gray area. So let's talk about it.
I can't believe I haven't pushed back within the first 10 seconds. So sorry, Aaron. I'm sorry, but I've heard that before, and I tend to. At first I agreed with it, the whole idea that it's guessing, but that's exactly what a human brain does. And I've been watching lots of videos on very, very detailed videos recently about how language models operate and how they understand the complexities of the human language and how words work together. So yes, it is predictive. Obviously, GPT stands for generative pre-trained transformer. So you're generating words based on the technology, but that's exactly, they modeled it after the human brain. And so the human brain, I
want to reinforce what you're saying, Robert. Yeah. You're absolutely right. There is no disputing there's a huge store of knowledge that's been instilled somehow into this neural network. And while it may not be rote, it's not rote knowledge. You can't go into the neural network and say, here's where the little perceptron is that has this factoid. It nonetheless can assemble those things through its predictive capabilities, just like you can.
Right. So my argument to people who are like, whatever their comment is, I say, well, it can imitate it just as good. So it's almost like the Turing test all over again. Like if it can imitate it good, then how is it not knowledge? And it's obviously a philosophical question. It's like a rabbit trail kind of conversation. But if it can imitate knowledge, then isn't it knowledge? Because if you can't tell the difference. So anyway, this
leads into the question of hallucination, which is like, well, if there's a gap in the training where there's just not enough density of knowledge, I'm going to use that term, that's been captured somehow in the neural network, which is trillions of parameters, right? If it's not been captured, then because it's just doing prediction, it's going to predict something that it doesn't have enough basis for. And that's the foundation of how a hallucination happens.
Sure.
Yeah. Or could we say that if it's trained on a lot of poor data, then it's going to give predictions back? And tell me if I'm wrong on this, but the way I would think about it is if it's got a lot of incorrect data, then it's just as likely to predict the next token set of words based on that incorrect data. Why would it know any differently? Do I have that wrong? Do I have that right?
No, that's right. And a smaller set, like, some of the large language models are you can get in different sizes of parameters, right? Here's the 7 billion parameter model. Here's the 500 billion parameter model, and here's the trillion. The only difference is that they've basically created many, many more layers in the neural network, and they've fed it a lot more information. So in the totality of the information that's collected, there's less bad influence data, right? It's not a narrow or gappy kind of training. And so you have a much more competent LLM.
Right.
Okay.
So, guys, I kind of want to throw a question to you, because I was actually having a conversation with a friend of mine today, and we were talking about, using AI in business. I provide and sell marketing services to clients, and we were discussing all that kind of stuff. And the thing she said to me was, I would think, and this is her words, not mine, I would think that a lot of people who are buying the services of a marketing person for AI generated content, one of the concerns would be things like plagiarism and that kind of stuff. And at the time I thought, well, I haven't really seen anything blatantly obvious in that department. But I just want to throw it over to you guys. What do you, have you encountered anything like this, or any of that sort of stuff? Because I think there's my thought at the time was that I don't think it's a big deal, but maybe I'm wrong. So I'm interested to hear what you guys have got to say on that one.
Well, I can add two to this. One, there's a national story about this, what I'll talk about in a second. But also, I will tell you, I've even run into it a little bit, Aaron, with setting up these shows. So as you guys know, but maybe not everybody else is, before the show, obviously I'm trying to, like, we come up with the topics collectively, but then there's some show notes that are going to go, they're not the notes, they're like what we think we're going to talk about today, like today. So it goes on a LinkedIn post or whatever. It says, hey, this is what we think we're going to talk about today. After the show, obviously we can use our transcripts and I can edit that. But prior to that, and so one of the things I've seen is that it will give me the source link, which is really, really helpful in GPT-4. And when I'm using like Copilot, one of the internet plugins, but it will give me a very convincing list of things that you could talk about in a show. And it'll say, hey, just FYI, this was pulled in part from this particular blog. Well, I will tell you, I have had to go look at that blog because sometimes it's almost a word for word reiteration of in ChatGPT. It's sometimes I will tell you, I get a little bit I'm not going to use the wording from ChatGPT, because when I go look at the blog and I do my trust but verify and put the human back into the feedback loop, I'm finding that it's almost exactly the words from it. And so
that's interesting, because that suggests that if you're using Web Pilot, I think is what it's called, or a scraper as context injection, then you increase the risk of plagiarizing insofar as the output will be based on stuff that's now in memory, and that could be rote. It could be a rote recitation of what it just scraped. Whereas if you're just deep diving into the large language model's general knowledge, as to coin a term for general stuff, if you're just diving into that, it's likely to generate something, especially if you have some randomness or temperature setting in there. It's going to generate something that's a little more novel than a simple recitation.
Well, you got to using custom functions, right? They introduced that a few weeks ago. Is put in your line that says, make sure that any response is rewritten to be unique. That might just be a safety feature, or that may be something that can be built into the next version or something like that. But that is something that, as a user, you definitely need to be aware of, and you should definitely apply it. Just think of it, back for your student days. You're not gonna crib something from Wikipedia, right? You're gonna use it as a jumping off point to get to what your real statement is, and then you list your source. So
I don't remember the old
apply that.
There was old rules back in the day. I don't remember them from college or high school, but like what constitutes plagiarism? Like how much do you have to change of a sentence for it to be your own? I'm sure there's rules about that. I don't remember. I'm curious if it did actually change enough of that, even though it sounded like it looked like it was almost identical. Did it change enough for it to not be considered? I don't know. That's just a question I thought I'd throw out there.
Well, there's plagiarism rules, and then there's the sniff test, right? So like we're wanting to be also sniffable, I guess is what I want to say. The other thing that I'm thinking of is that what AI introduces is speed and exactness, right? So like I remember having to write in the style of Fitzgerald or somebody, right? Like we were assigned to immersing enough in someone's style that we could imitate it.
Right.
But that happened over a semester or a series of weeks. It was not. Thanks for that.
Just trying to help.
Stay tuned for our merch coming.
Yeah, there's a merch. Good idea.
Stay tuned for our DAS merch coming soon. But because AI can generate so much so quickly and exactly, it brings this kind of learning style or learning process into a more danger zone, I think.
So if I can, I'm not sure if anybody's got another thought, but I want to interject another element of this topic of copyright, because the Copyright Office in the United States just recently announced they're looking for feedback. And I think the feedback is due by, I don't know, sometime in October. But the agency wants to answer three main questions. AI models should use copyrighted data in their training. Number two, whether AI generated material can be copyrighted even without a human involved, which is a very important distinction, because I was always under the impression if I'm the prompter that I think a human was involved, but they're saying even if it, like as an API and it's automated, even if that is not involved. So that's a very important question. And how copyright liability would work with AI, which is interesting because now they're talking about publicity and unfair competition laws, especially in the context of AI Drake, or being able to put together a fake avatar of a celebrity and use that to sell products. So they're actually looking for input to help drive the direction of the Copyright Office. What are your thoughts on that?
I am glad they are doing this 100%, because it really hammers home a couple of things. Number one, they recognize that this is a new area for them, and they don't really have anything, they don't have any hard facts on it. They don't have any hard rulings on it. Even if you look at their guidelines that they released back in March, it really was just a blanket statement to cover any rulings that come across them, right? Number one, they still say it's used case by case. Number two, they say you have to have the traditional human expression or those elements in any copyright request or situation, which is essentially just falling back to it's got to be made by a human. And number three, they were blatant about saying prompts don't qualify. And that, for me, that was the biggest one. And that's the one I personally have some issue with. And
prompts don't qualify.
But the idea is if you give the prompt is giving instructions to the AI and the AI is simply executing on it, right? So how's that different than, let's say, a photographer giving instructions to their assistants to set up the shot, and then they take the shot and decide, yes, that's the one that I want.
So you're saying that I'm sorry, I was clarifying, Jimmy. So you're saying the prompt they're saying is also included in their
guidelines. They mention that prompts do not qualify.
Okay,
for copyright.
I see that a lot, Jimmy. I'm in this. I use Leonardo a lot, which is one of the. It's like a Midjourney. It's a image creation tool, text to image, and I'm in the Facebook group for it. And as you would imagine, lots and lots and lots of people share their creations in that group. Some people share their prompts, or if they're asked, they'll share them. Other people, and I've seen people get very, very upset about it and say, why should I share my prompt? Blah, blah, blah. I've worked really hard to create this prompt and craft it just so and get it to a certain point. And this is almost a, unique identifier or something that I could go on and sell services off of to create these prompts. I put hours into the whatever. I will tell you, there was a huge conversation underneath this one post. And a lot of people were like, I mean, I'll say basically, get over yourself. Get over yourself. Like, your prompt isn't that special. You're not that special, that kind of thing. Right. I mean, it was a big pushback. Some people were in this original author's corner and they're saying, yes, you're right. I have spent hours tweaking and multiple tokens and paid money into this system to get it just right. And now you're just saying you want to cut the line and you want to see my prompt so you can go recreate it. But then other people say, like, yeah, but even if I use your prompt exactly, I will not get the same result as you do. It's not guaranteed. So how good is your prompt? It worked for you, but it's not necessarily something I could just take and run with. Anyway, I don't have an answer to any of that. I just think it is very interesting as to, you know, I sort of agree with you, which is like, if I work really hard at a prompt, and actually I've created prompt libraries and I do sell those services through Scale Consulting. I will tell you, though, it's not just about the prompts. It's about the overall strategy of using prompts and being better while using them as part of your system. That's actually what I'm selling is the training that goes along, the methodology that goes along with it, right? So it's not just the prompts. Them and themselves, I don't find to be very valuable. I think I honestly could give them away and it wouldn't really matter. But we all know what lots of people pay for is like, I can give everybody in the world a nutrition plan. That doesn't mean that I won't still have 50% people who come back to me and say, yeah, but could you just help me do it? Or could you help me cook the food? Or could you put it on the plate for me? I don't want to touch any of it. So my take on it is, you can give 90% away for free. That doesn't matter.
Right.
Say again.
And I just want to reiterate, I think it's super important that everyone goes and answers those questions for the Copyright Office. Do it. Take the time, please. Yeah. Because especially in, you know, I'm sure our audience, the groups that we belong to, everybody needs to give their input, because this is the kind of thing that helps develop the legislation and develops the rulings that are going to you know, involve or influence everything that we do with AI and copyright for years to come. Because I can tell you, government is slow. So once they make a decision and once a law goes through, it takes forever to get that fixed or changed. And so please involve yourself, put your thoughts, whether you're for, against, it all matters.
Do we have the link for that?
People in the government are typically Luddites, so you know they don't even know how to think about a lot of this stuff. So you know, people like us who actually have some understanding of the nuances here, I think it's more important to have our feedback put in there so that they can sort of see the bigger picture, as it were.
So I'm going to come back to the speed issue, and I'm a little bummed to hear that question to it is discussing without a human involved, because I feel like those are two different concepts. Because we all know it's possible to automate something, right? I could automate a list of like 1,000 icons that I want created in a tiny little vector style. And I could get that done in like 30 seconds. Are those now my copyright? I mean, like a vector of an icon, right? Like that seems kind of ridiculous in the amount that I can create. And I actually can, like, I can train somebody on my I can train somebody. Yes, all AI is people to me. Sorry. I can train a model on my personal style that I don't see elsewhere. And I can get pretty specific generations in that. And if I'm big, then you can probably put my name in Midjourney. It'll try to have that be an influence.
I believe the initial guidance is that no generative output is copyrightable.
Yeah.
Particularly on the image side of it.
Right.
Yeah. And that's the issue that's the issue that I have with it, and I'm sure a lot of other people do as well. But Beth, what you're saying, I think it brings up two distinct points that we should explore. Is number one, it goes back to that prompting. Prompting is not considered enough human interaction, and I think that needs to be explored. I understand that when you say logo of cat, that doesn't seem like enough interaction. But when you say the cat must look like this, it must be this old, it must be in this environment, it must have this lighting, I want the color of the fur to be this way, and it has to have these style implementations that you.
And I've given you. I've given you 10
complicated.
images of my physical creation, or I've created something. What I do, we did a show on Midjourney. I refer to as digital improvisational collage or improvisational digital collage, depending on which word I say first. It should be a thing. Sorry. But I do I go between Procreate and Midjourney so that there is a little bit more interaction.
I predict that kind of thing, the prompt, the clever, creative ways that you can generate something, more sophisticated than another person, is going to fall into the area of trade secrets, trade secrets, not copyright,
which shouldn't be confused with it, right? Because there is a big difference between patents and copyright, trade secrets, trademarks, and those kinds of things. And I've been learning that over the last year myself to make sure that I understand each of those things. But I just want to cover that second point, and Beth, to exactly what you were saying, is like generating 1,000 images or whatnot. And it's the prevailing thought that it has to be hard for it to be valuable, which I think is a big paradigm shift, right? We got to get out of this thought that, I worked for X amount of hours, so that's what the value is. The value isn't that. The value is what it contributes to the end result, right? If I help somebody make $10 million, then my contribution should be part of that. It shouldn't be, I worked for 10 hours, so it's only this much. Because of AI, that's going to shift everything, because I can do things in 4 hours instead of 40. But because I have advanced tools and I can produce the effect that that scope of work that you're asking for, I only spent 4 hours. So that's now worth less.
Well, right? I mean, look, we've been seeing this for years, right? Andy Warhol, and the suit cans, the Campbell suit cans, and almost getting to a mass production. And well, is that the same thing? Is that still valuable? I mean, I go back to like the artist, or maybe Beth, you can answer this since you do like improv and you do that kind of stuff. If somebody came to you and said, you found out today that somebody had been sitting in the back of the room, unbeknownst to you, recording every single improv that you were a part of for the last, let's say, 3 years, and that amounted to hundreds of hours worth of audio or something like that, and that had been fed into a language model, is that a problem? Is that a problem for you personally? I'm just curious, does that bother you that somebody might be able to theoretically go in and ask prompts and say, give me an improv skit, and it could be very close to something that you feel like you would have created out of your blood, sweat, and tears over years and years?
So this is a great example. This is a great example because improv is not created alone. So you can take my stuff and you can take the scenes that I've been in, and improv is kind of a special thing. Like, it will not affect my ability to entertain an audience in the future. Sure. You might learn, but if you try to produce that as a recorded thing or that kind of stuff, I also think we've sort of gotten away from the plagiarism in a written context, and now we're sort of talking about what happens visually. And I think those are slightly different, and also just really interesting to note that that's where we've moved, because so much of what we're dealing with AI is language trained, and the image training is both different and not as widespread, not as well used, not as understood, that kind of stuff.
Well,
you're gonna push back? I'm getting ready.
I think it's becoming. I mean, if you use Midjourney, most people using it, I would say maybe 25% do it in the style of, because they want to mimic, they want to a t-shirt logo on the style of a famous minimalist line artist, right? I was looking on Leonardo yesterday and seeing lots of those pop up. So I think that, again, it goes back to the conversation of are they derivative? Are they plagiaristic? I think that if I was able to read the whole internet and then regurgitate a book, that kind of look like a Edgar Allan Poe because I liked him the most? Is that going to be that's derivative, right? So how is any of these outputs, whether it be visual like a Midjourney or a output like a ChatGPT, I'm really leaning into the derivative. Everything is derivative, which means it's not copyrightable. Which means the output, though, which is the other question, is if I want to use this tool to create some IP for my company, that's the other question that I'm really struggling with. Is that output? I want to own this and have it protected. I should be able to say I went through the process to use AI to do that. If you want to go through the process to make it do exactly the same as me, go for it. But the product will probably even be different. You've seen that. You do the same exact prompt 5 times, you don't get the same thing because there's drift, because there's temperatures, they're not the same. So you're not going to get the same output. So I don't know. I'm rambling.
I don't think we can base the law on the fact that it's not good enough yet. Right? Like that's not a future thinking situation.
So let's move from law to just what's ethical and what's a misrepresentation of your own creative output. So I want to draw attention to some really big next get rich quick schemes that are being marketed by some of the biggest names in the business. And I'm going to specifically reference Trey Smith and Tony Robbins and Grazioni or whatever. They're pitching to their audiences that each individual member of the audience has some unique gift of knowledge that can be delivered to the world and will be remunerative to them. They can make tons of money. The ads for Trey Smith are, hey, we made $30,000 last week on this book that I generated in 15 seconds, that sort of thing. So the question is there going to be this proliferation of people using AI and generating books that are quite readable and are on a topic and are marketed aggressively out there in the marketplace, but it's basically diluting the extraordinary accomplishment of real authorship when you use AI to generate a complete tome that's covering the whole subject.
Yes.
There is a guy I follow on LinkedIn, and he's very, very he's worse than I am. I know it's hard to believe, but he's very futuristic, opinionated, and he has this strong opinion that, I mean, in a very short period of time, he's constantly talking about his opinion that the future is, I want a movie tonight that's kind of like a Bruce Willis kind of Die Hardy movie, and go ahead and make it for me, AI, or same for books. So there is a truth, Andy, that a lot of where this is going is those producers of that content, those great writers, and like the AI strike that's going on right now in Hollywood, they should be worried because a lot of this stuff is going to be more specific. Like we could all go home tonight and say, I want to watch a movie, and all 6 of us have 6 different movies created by AI. Not right now, maybe in 10 years, but I think that's a very scary thought for a lot of people that are creatives.
I was just one quick comment I want to say about this whole idea of quote unquote copying people, and particularly as it relates to something like Midjourney, for example. So my guess, I'm not an artist, but my guess is that going back since Adam was a boy, artists have learned to become artists by quote unquote copying, or at least modeling what other people have done before.
100%.
Yeah.
So that in and of itself it's kind of like Midjourney. If I'm a fan of some famous artist style and I actually had any kind of art talent in my body, which I don't, but if I was good enough to do it, I could create an artwork that looked like something made by someone famous. So how is that? We don't take those people to court normally and sue them for copyright infringement unless they do a complete and utter duplicate of somebody else's work. So how is that any different from something like Midjourney doing it? where you don't tend to get an exact duplicate of the originals.
If we go back to the very first part of our conversation, Aaron, then it's exactly the same. First part of our conversation being that it operates, language models operate the same as a brain. And if you look at it from a visual perspective, if you're saying that it's derivative because they're inspired, that's what the human would do. I'm inspired by this. I mean, I listen to this music, and so I want to create music like it because I like that kind of style. Well, you wouldn't be able to say that to or unless you want to anthropomorphize the AI. So you'd have to say, well, it's more technical and it's stealing it and it's repeating. Well, if it's created the same way a brain works, then it's doing the same thing a human's doing. So it's why couldn't you give it the same license or the same flexibility? It's a very interesting topic that I think we're going to be battling with for years. Brian, you had a pushback on something. What was it?
I do back on Andy's thing. Now I'm too down. I'm too backwards. But what I was going to say is, I think Ed Sheeran just went through this. We saw the copyright laws where he's like, I'm sorry, you can't copyright GCD on a guitar, right? You like at a certain point, GCD has written thousands, and many of them are very, very famous songs, and they're written on GCD somewhere up or down the fret line, depending on where they threw the capo and what tone they sang in. Yet we're all perfectly okay with that. And I guess this is sort of my rollback to what Andy said. I will just say this as the consumer, and I know Google has taken this stance as of right now, and I agree with it, which is, hey, does it diminish what the person went through, the true artist who toiled over it, or who maybe went through personal pains or sat on top of a mountain in a diaper or something like that to write this book? Am I more impressed with the book and what it does for me because I know they did that? Do I care that Tom Cruise does his own stunts and that makes me want to see the movie? No. All I care about as the consumer, not the creator, but as the consumer, is, did it entertain me? Did it educate me? Did it inspire me? Did it do all three of those? Did it move me in some way? I will tell you, I don't personally care if it was 100% created by AI, human plus AI, or otherwise, because to Robert's point, when I sit down to Netflix and I'm looking for a passive, just melt into my couch, don't want to think for the next hour, honestly, I don't care if it was AI in the previous 30 seconds. If it suits my needs, I'm totally fine with it. That's just me. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I think that is, we can all say we care a lot until we get exactly what we want. And then we go, oh, we don't really care that much. And I agree that if I was an author or writer, an actor, an actress, I would have serious issues with this as the performer. But if I'm just talking about the consumer, it doesn't bother me. So I don't know if that's a good one to end on. Anybody else want to throw anything else out there? Otherwise, we can wrap it up for today.
There's so much to say. Come back. Come back to another
audience. Comment, say that, let us know if you want more on this, and we'll do a deeper dive.
Yeah, I think we got to like 2 out of about 10 comments.
Yeah,
it's always the case. I know Robert said right before the call, he said, oh my God, there could be a show on every one of these topics. And that's absolutely right.
Maybe we should go to a 45-minute show.
Then we'll be at an hour show. Let's stay at our 30.
Comment if you want us to talk more.
Yeah, and then we would have, before you know, we'd have 3-hour shows and stuff like that. No,
I'm down for it. Once a week though.
30 minutes always means we have more to say. We always have more to say. So make sure you guys come back next week, or this week rather, not next week. Come back this week, the rest of this week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We got lots more topics to talk about. As always, you can find out what those topics are if you like by going over to our LinkedIn page for the Daily AI Show Live. It's got all the events set up for this week, so you can go check those out. Maybe you're interested on Thursday or Friday's topic or whatever, or come back and listen every single day. You can also find us on replays on LinkedIn. You can find us on YouTube. You can start to find us on TikTok now, and you can also find full show audio and video replays on Spotify. So we're getting out there, we're getting around. Appreciate all the support. And with that, we will say goodbye for today, and we'll see y'all tomorrow.
Ciao.
Happy Tuesday.